Thank you very much, members of the press, to be out on very late notice. I think it was only this morning that we informed you that we're going to have a press conference. It's more or less in relation to my Suriname trip with 3 other senior officers. Let me first of all state that on Sunday morning we all went over to Suriname, that is Mr. Brian Eastman, Mr. Kingston, and Mr. Wayne DeHart. Along with myself, we went to Suriname more or less to work with the Surinamese authority to ensure that interest is being paid to the victims of that very gruesome attack, and also to have more or less a conversation with the family members, and to establish arrangements that will ensure that the perpetrators of that gruesome attack, in which some 20 members, 19 of whom I think are Guyanese, 1 Surinamese, were attacked in the high seas off Suriname's coast, and to ensure that collaborative systems are in place to thwart such attacks in the future. The very first morning of our arrival, I met with about 25 members of the relatives of the victims. And we had a meeting at the Guyana Embassy in Paramaribo, myself along with Ambassador George, who had made the contacts with those relatives. And at that meeting, it was highly emotive, as you would appreciate, and very tearful, listening to the sentiments of the many relatives, wives and aunt, and a surviving captain who was present there. And it was a meeting in which a number of issues were raised with me and Ambassador George, and also certain complaints made to us, and also what we can do to help them in a variety of ways: legal advice, financial, psychological, and so on, and also how to get better documentation in case they would want to go over there, or other family members from Guyana getting over there. We then had a meeting on the Monday morning with Minister of Police and Justice, Minister of Defense, Minister of Agriculture, the police commissioner, and the chief detective, who was the person in charge of the investigations. And from that meeting, we got a more or less inside scoop as to what it is and how far it is that the investigations had gone. Our side comprised of myself, Ambassador George, his deputy, and the 3 policemen, 3 officers that went over there. I should tell you that the first person to speak at that meeting to give us a status report, more or less, was the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Anthony Chin, who gave us a day-by-day account from the time they learnt of what had happened in the high seas, as of that they started as of the 28th, because it's then when they learnt. And so it was from the 28th to the 7th of May, 28th of April to the 7th of May. And it was a lot of things that were done by them in relation to getting hold of a number of people to give statements. The other thing was getting the relatives. And what was clear to me was that everyone on the Suriname side was very, very concerned about this massacre, this, very serious tragedy. And of course, too, it did appear that members of the press were also on their backs in relation to what was happening, and also relatives of the deceased and relatives of the persons who have not yet been found were also making certain complaints. Indeed, the two ministers of Defense and Agriculture had a meeting with relatives in the Suriname side, New Amsterdam, it's called, and brought to the attention of those what they will do. And we were told what they were doing were a lot of helicopter searches, Coast Guard searches, and they're continuing the search for bodies and survivors. We also were told by them that the chief detective will give a status report on the investigation. Now, this was a lengthy meeting, and I do not think it would be right for me to give you all the things that transpired, but suffice to state that the chief detective indicated that some 30 persons were arrested in relation to this matter, and that by that time, that was the Monday morning, and based on the information that they had gathered and the questions asked and the answers given and so on, 12 out of the 30 were detained, and 2 of the 12 were primary suspects. And the suspects were largely related to a person who was gunned down and an employee of that person in some incident that had happened on the 29th of March, I think, was the 30th of March. And it did appear from all the circumstances of their investigation that it was moving apace and that the evidence was pointing to a retaliation for that murder that happened on the 30th of March by these relatives of that murdered man. I wouldn't go on further because it might be not in the interest of the investigation to give you all the facts, but the Minister of Police and Justice, Mr. Stuart Guitro, indicated that the investigations will continue, that he really wanted a strengthening of our intelligence collaboration with the Guyanese police, and he was very happy that we had brought in the 3 very senior officers there to get to the truth of what happened, to get justice done to the families and to the culprits that get charged and prosecuted, and to get to the root cause of the killings, because it could be something that could be perpetuated in other occasions. He also indicated that he will continue the joint operation with his Coast Guard, his Army, and his police, collaborating with the community of Guyanese over there, because it does appear that some good information can also come from the Guyanese community over there. Minister Guitro Stuart indicated also that there will be immediate setting up of regulations for the fishery sector, which is dominated by Guyanese, and more or less what is being proposed is something like I had proposed here too, creating checkpoints to know who went out to fish, the actual persons going into the boats, from where they went out, how many, their identities and so on, and when they came in back and so work out a fishing vessel monitoring system, and also to speak to the relatives of the victims to give, as he described it, moral, psychological, and financial support. Now, as you would appreciate, the trade, the fishing business was closed down after they learned about this massacre, and also the fishermen themselves had gotten very scared to go out and fish. But in view of what has transpired now, there is call by the fishing community, he told us, and that himself and the Minister of Agriculture will decide within a week for the reopening of the business, because it is a business that provides nutrition to the communities in and around the whole coast of Suriname. And it was important too that further damage not be done, and that they were going to make their decision as to the reopening. We also gave, through Mr. Kingston, a report as to what was the status of the investigation in Guyana, how many people were arrested, and a number of other things that were going on here. And after that meeting, very successful meeting of sharing the information and status report as to the investigation and what were proposed to be done, we then met with the Vice President of the country, Mr. Ali, Shazad Ali, paid a courtesy call. He was not very far. It was in the compound. It was in his office, compound, that we were having the meeting. And we spoke on the continuing collaboration between the two police forces, technical exchange of information, and also what we did here to bring down the rates of piracy. As you know, it was a very big thing a couple of years ago, but we did manage to cause a decline in the amount of piracies incidents in our high seas. And we shared some of what we had done. And it was decided, in view of the press behaving just like you guys, always wanting to know, because you have your constituency, the readership, and the viewership to tell their story, we decided that yes, we will have a press conference that afternoon. And we did have the press conference at the President Bautis's press room. At that press conference, the press directed almost all their questions to the Security Minister and the Agriculture Minister and the Defense Minister of Suriname. I think you have a fair idea of what they would have asked, and you probably know of that press conference. It was an open press conference whereby they were asking again the status report of the investigations and a number of other things. And later that evening, I came back Monday to Guyana. I want to say that it is extremely disappointing that we were doing so well in relation to managing the piracy incidents through our aerial surveillance and the tactical approach of constantly going to some of these fishery checkpoints, 66 and 43 and Rosignol and a number of other places, and doing what other things that we had to do that might very well remain confidential here, that brought it down low, and to get this major disaster, this catastrophe, this massacre happening, and almost entirely Guyanese involvement, whether victims or perpetrators. Because from the surviving 5 thus far members, it does appear that it is Guyanese who were the actual perpetrators. And of course, what we know now, Guyanese were the actual victims, except for one Surinamese, I think. So it really, you know, halted us into a state of somewhat, well, major disappointment and despair, you can say, because here it is, we were doing very well, and then we are hoping that we are going to still have survivors, and because, you know, hope is something that rests eternal in all of us. But whatever we can do to help the relatives and friends at this stage, we promise that we're going to do. Moral, psychological, and financial, and both sides indicated as much. Surinamese authorities, and I also did that. A number of the difficulties that some of the families have been indicating had to do with getting documentation, and I understand our side been at best doing so for, I think, 7 of the relatives, and we have waived the cost of getting the documentation and the fees and all of that done so that they could go across there. As to when the bodies will be handed over to, because that was a big concern of the relatives, from the 3 bodies that were recovered, when it will be given, we were told that that will only be done when DNA testing will be carried out, because they did not want to give wrong bodies to wrong families. That could be very embarrassing. And they have their DNA methods over there and procedures over there, and the Minister of Police and Justice indicated as much, that it will take some time. So I had to call back a number of the relatives to indicate that patience is what is required. Some had wanted, I think, to get the bodies back to Guyana, but because of the state of decomposition, I think that might not be a good thing. And also the Surinamese authorities are of the view too. The other thing I should mention is that we are going to continue this collaboration. We have left, of course, our Ambassador George there to continue communicating with the relatives, and whatever they would want to have communicated with the Surinamese authorities, that will also be done. Yes, and of course, communication with our crime chief, Mr. Paul Williams, and the direct relationship with Mr. Anthony Chin, the Commissioner of Police over in Suriname. I would now ask the Commissioner of Police to make a statement in relation to what has been happening here in the Guyana side, and if a status report in relation to this matter, and anything further that could be added by Paul or Kingston, that can be done. If you could just shift.
Good afternoon once again. Just to indicate that from day one, we have been in what you would call constant and intensive collaboration with the police authorities, in particular in Suriname. In fact, about an hour and a half ago, I was in communication with the Acting Commissioner of Police in Suriname. And we also have another officer in Suriname who has been doing some very excellent work, keeping us informed of developments over there. From an investigative standpoint, we have at this point in time 3 persons in custody. There's a lot of information that has already been published in the press in terms of them being suspects and some other particulars about them and so on. But I would want to say at this point in time that the 3 persons in custody are in custody as a result of information received, and it is not definitive at this point in time as to the nature of any involvement or the extent of any involvement at this point in time. We did receive some information for 1 or 2 fishermen which seem to have placed one of the persons in custody at a certain area in Suriname prior to the departure of fishermen. and a certain conversation would have unfolded. But that is as far as we have at this point in time, based on the fact that we are in constant contact with our legal advisor, having obtained statements and detailed statements and so on. There's a lot more work that needs to be done to get to the bottom of it. The thing is that the victims, the first 4 victims who reported, gave call names of the persons who were involved. And on the Suriname side, as far as I'm aware, one call name by the name of Crackhead and another by the name of Dick are amongst the several persons that they still have in custody. They had 12, and I'm told the last report I got from our contact in Suriname was another 3. Another 3 persons were arrested on Monday afternoon, are in custody now in Suriname, so that's 15. I did confirm that with Commissioner Chin, as I spoke with him about an hour and a half ago. On our side here, we have 3 persons in custody, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. It seems to be that the basis for this gruesome, heinous, and dastardly act had to do with some form of retaliation for one of the persons in custody whose brother was allegedly gunned down in a drive-by shooting on the 29th of March in Suriname. So
30th of March.
30th of March in Suriname. And he has a number of boats that ply the trade there in Suriname. And we have, among other things, sought extension to, because we have a lot of investigative work to do. This morning, I took the opportunity to give a brief to the Interagency Task Force on Piracy, which was established a couple of years under the current administration. Commissioner of Police is the chairman, and there's a coordinator, Mr. Adams from the Ministry of the Presidency. All the agency heads were there, and I took the opportunity to give them a brief on the developments thus far in this alleged piracy in Suriname waters. I also took the opportunity to indicate to them about the visit of the team led by Minister, and that from the police perspective, there's a report being prepared. We did take the opportunity also to review what strategies we have here. I asked them to remain vigilant, and the Coast Guard in particular, and police, we have agreed that there's some more work that we need to do. But as Minister indicated, the issues of vessel monitoring, that device that has to do with helping to monitor where a particular vessel is at a particular time, and the issue of firearm licenses and so on, that was one of the things, 2 of the matters that were raised at the Interagency Task Force meeting this morning, and I think the meeting went well. The members who are all keeping abreast of the developments by the press, print, and electronic were very appreciative of the update, and I did indicate to them, as Minister indicated prior, the difficulties in Suriname that has to do with identification. You know, it is very troubling, but not unusual for persons in that field of work or that trade to be known by call names for a number of years and seem to have forgotten what the real name is and that kind of stuff. So those are some of the issues you have to deal with. So that collaboration is going on a day-to-day basis. It has worked well in the past, and it will continue to be so. In fact, the Commissioner of Police in Suriname did indicate to me that, and we agreed, that sometime soon, I think in a matter of 2 weeks or just 3 weeks, a team of Suriname police officials will be coming here to Guyana to work along and to do further collaboration with our local counterparts, Crime Chief, Head of Special Branch, and a few others on other matters, as we have done in the past. We have had 2 exchange visits thus far, and this is probably going to be a 3rd, with notwithstanding the one that was done on Saturday night when Minister and the team left. So that is as much I'd like to tell you at this point in time.
Oh yes, I did make a request for the file on this issue and a translated version. And remember, it is a sovereign country that is doing the investigation, and the minister indicated that he's going to do his best, but you would want the legal opinion first as to transferring of files to Guyana. I rather suspect, knowing the collaboration that we have, that yes, indeed, because we would like to utilize that set of information too for furthering our investigation here. I'm now going to open for questions.
So this person stop please. Good afternoon. I know you did mention a possible motive, but could we have a name of the person who was killed, and could you say whether or not he's Guyanese? And I know the Commissioner of Police has indicated that persons were held here. But at your meeting, Minister, did the Surinamese officials give you any indication that 5 or 6 suspects might have fled here? Is there anyone specifically that you're seeking?
You know, that's, by the way, first of all, the question of who was gone down, it was a Guyanese, Somnath Manohar. Yeah. Yes. And from all the information they're gathering, it is pointing to a set of people that they're trying to get. Okay? That is as much as I can say as to the identities of the people. You know, it is preferable that the police do their work, knowing that.
Mr. Chabral Damrales, sir, should any of the 3 or even more persons here in Guyana be found to be culpable, how do you intend to have them turn to Suriname in the absence of an extradition treaty between the 2 countries, given the fact that they are in Guyana and they are Guyanese?
Well, we do have mutual legal assistance treaties as a result of conventions that both countries have signed on to. And there are methods by which, if indeed they request certain persons, that we can, in my opinion, send them across. Murder is an offense with a jurisdiction that is international. And I do not know all the legal courses that could be taken, but I rather suspect that even if we don't, we can charge him here in Guyana, or charge them here in Guyana.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and ask that the witnesses come across.
Yeah, just to indicate, in continuation of Minister, that our anti-piracy legislation provides for persons to be charged here, even though the offense
was committed in
any
any other
in
territory.
another territorial jurisdiction. And we have used that legislation in the past successfully.
Our terrorism act has anything to do with assisting this process? Charging?
Our terrorism act, I don't think this is a terrorism act as it were. This has the clear delineations of a murder and piracy at high seas. But I haven't given it thought, nor have I done the research to answer your question. But immediately it's a murder investigation that is being conducted in Guyana as well as in Suriname.
Minister Kirkham, you spoke about financial assistance. Can you say that assistance will only extend to returning the bodies in burial, or it will also address the welfare of relatives?
At the immediate welfare, if the bodies are handed over and they require monies for a funeral, I suspect that we can help in that. But long-term help for maintenance and so on, that will be something that will have to be decided by our government. And at a certain level, we do have temporary arrangements for financial help. And that is what I was more or less intending when I made my statement in relation to financial help.
You also spoke about the success this government would have had in curbing piracy in Guyana's water, but as we've seen recently, this happened in Suriname's water, but it affected Guyanese. How do we extend our monitoring to protect Guyanese working in waters in Suriname?
Well, if you can take a clue, we have to ask Guyanese fishermen not to be that vengeful. Clearly, because somebody got gunned down and then the indications are that they're going to do a tit-for-tat retaliation. That's not the way. And so we, apart from that, so the community itself, the fisherfolk community, and the proprietors and the workers and the employees and all, will have to understand that we, though tough in this job, you just don't go and take the law into your own hands and you feel that 20 other person out there you could kill. That is wholly atrocious kind of thinking. That's the first thing. The other thing is that we have to plead with them to get the transponders that we talk about on their boats, to get better radio systems. It will cost some money, but if they are under attack, they can radio in, so that at least we can have calls made, and if they immediately could tell us the descriptions and so on, it will ease and create deterrent effects. That is an important thing. Better checkpoints, you know, whenever anybody going out, so we can know. If you see any person not checking in to go out there, we can know that that is a suspect boat that might be carrying criminals and so on. And our aerial surveillance can capture that on photographs and all of that, and that can help. So many things can help. But it goes back to the mind of the men. If it is a murderous mind that we're talking about, you will have it no matter what you want to halt it. And because of the deterring effect, I think it is something that now shifted across to Suriname, and that is not good for either Guyana or Suriname.
Sorry, Bill, that there was a very fluid situation of people moving across, living there, living over here, and so on. But then immediately, I think on Monday, we saw some reports of people being deported because of being illegal. Has this situation changed that informal situation that was prevailed in the past?
That is one of the questions I raised with the Minister of Police and Justice, and he indicated that they clearly, once the Guyanese were there for a period of time, they will remain there. I am unaware of those who might have been deported. I did ask the question of him if they are going to be deported. Guyanese that are there that might not have their documentation in order, that have not been a long time staying there. And he said, no, they will not be. But I saw in the press too that some people saying that some were deported. I don't know if those were recent persons that went across and were not documented and they were deported. But I haven't heard the names of those persons or how many of them. But that is somewhat contrary to what was told of me by the Minister of Police and Justice, that absolutely they want that Guyanese community because they provide an extraordinarily important function.
Could you find out, because it is their press release, the police press release in Suriname that says that the people who were picked up, questioned, and they were found to be without documents, illegals if you want to call them that, were sent back?
Yeah. Well, yes, I will definitely find out. If for some reason, although they don't have their documents, it's a discretion, remember. It's always a discretion. They sometimes will allow Guyanese who are not documented properly because they probably are of good character. But if they feel, based on investigations and the information that they gather, no, send this guy home, well, then they do that. They generally, as far as I know, would lock them up for about 30 days after they would have passed through court, and then send them back after their lockup period. In this case, if they were sent home immediately, well, that would have been something I think they would accept if they didn't have their documents in order. But it is something that we have to collaborate on to get remedied, because a lot of Guyanese, you know, they just go across. We sometimes don't know when they're going across, and that Suriname's authorities, because of the backtracking, don't know when they land. And that's not good. We must tighten up on these immigration and checkpoint areas and so on, so we know those who are doing the border crossing.
Minister, do you have any plans? That I know the recent incident did not happen in our waters, but do you have any plans to meet with the fishermen on the quarantine? And I know you did mention aerial support, but what more can the government do to allay fears in the quarantine that, you know, this thing cannot happen over here?
It is to get the resources to have more boats out there, Coast Guard vessels that will monitor and even have more aerial surveys in our maritime area. And that is one of the reasons that we are going for a supplementary to get some more fixed-wing aircrafts. We need to ensure that our borders are properly surveilled and monitored. And that is why also we propose, I think you probably heard me say this and other members of the government, Mr. Joe Harmon, I think, we talk about getting drones. These are things that could create the necessary deterrent effect. But the greatest thing is the people themselves, when they get the information that because of what might happen, there will be a tit for tat, and then come and warn the police so that we can take precautionary measures and preventative measures. That is what. But if they just remain silent, as I have said before, silence then becomes violence. And so we need a community of men and women and that goes for all kinds of offense, the narcotics offense, the domestic violence offense, the piracy, the murder, everything. Suicide, those that are distraught and depressed and all of that. We see them in our homes. We know that something might go wrong. This girl is not behaving, but we don't. We shut up. We say that is now we business. Well, everything is our business. And we must learn to appreciate that, yes, we must come out and speak out and say, well, there's a potential for that, so that we can then. And it is not putting your mouth in other people's story. That is what Guyanese love to say. I can't do that. But we need the information too, Mr. the Crime Chief and the intelligence unit of the police force, so we can tap into that, these further investigate and find out. It has a deterring effect too.
Any plan to meet with the fishermen on the committee?
Yes, I don't know when I'll be going up to meet the police, but the fact that we had a meeting there is with the anti-piracy unit that is made up of married officials. I think officials from the Association of Fishermen were there? Or
No,
this is an internal thing. But
the commander of B Division met recently
with the fishermen
authorities at the 66 complex.
66 complex. But I will be trying my best to make some attempts to talk to them and to ensure that they are bolstered in confidence that their security will be looked after.
Minister, could we have an understanding as to what caused the delay in our team going to Suriname almost 1 week after the incident in Suriname?
Well, my duties as a minister and a number of other factors, and we had also an arrangement with the Surinamese authorities to go there on that weekend. I had preferred the weekend. Couldn't get a flight out on the Friday afternoon or the Saturday, and so with the 3 other policemen. But what? There's a negative about not going there on Sunday night?
I just wanted to say too that I wouldn't use the word delay. The thing is, it had happened. And even in Suriname, the authorities hadn't much information immediately. Took a matter of days before they got down to a better understanding of the extent of what had transpired, notwithstanding the fact that the 4 victims had turned up at different times at the New Amsterdam police station there to report. And so, from a policing perspective, having been in contact with our counterparts in Suriname, I felt too that the weekend visit was now the opportune moment for us to go. We'll be better briefed, there's a lot more information we're going to have. Allow the Suriname authorities to do their work without rushing to, right over immediately. That wouldn't have been necessary. That wouldn't have been the best thing to do. Right?
Any other question?
Yes, sir. There was a second attack in which a captain died. Are the 2 incidents, those set of incidents, are they linked?
Notice.
From
one incident, 5 boats were attacked, and that's 5 boats in all. That's the information.
Yeah, they were
That's the information. I think there were They were just in the neighboring areas.
The second attack took place on the 3rd of May, where a captain and crew of 4. The captain is missing. Yeah, the captain is missing. And based on the information I've received from the authorities, police authorities in Suriname, it seems to be the same number of suspects, numbering between 10 and 14, who would have perpetrated on that second attack.
So there is a relationship then.
There seems to be a
And
relationship.
are there more people that's missing on top of the 20 or that's it?
No, just the captain of the crew. The 4 other guys, fishermen, were rescued and so on.
Which brings me to the next question, Minister. Do we have a family connected to each one of these persons? Have we been able to identify, say, one of the 19 persons that went missing and the bodies probably recovered later? That there are families who says yes, that came forward, 20 families came forward. How were we able to ascertain that they were all Guyanese?
Well, because of the survivors indicating to the Surinamese authorities, and the survivors came from different boats, and they said that this is a set of Guyanese fellas who live at New Amsterdam area or the Moengo area, where they're from, whatever the areas. So it was through that information that was gathered there. And then also, the wives and the aunts and the mothers of those who went out, they're also confirming that, yes, this is a Guyanese by that name and whatever, or a call name and so on. So it is largely, yes, Guyanese that we feel, based on the credibility of those, of that information.
The other thing too is that Guyanese fishermen, you know, working in Suriname for a number of years, it was clear that the pirates, using that term, the pirates weren't masked. So they would know who's a Guyanese from who's a Surinamese or whatever the case may be. And they quickly indicated that the suspects are all Guyanese.
Mm-hmm.
Questions outside of the press conference, outside of this issue?
Minister, the opposition is planning to raise this issue at Friday session of the National Assembly. Can you see what is government's specific approach at the parliamentary level, if any?
I don't know. When they indicated that they're going to raise it as...
Friday.
Okay. Well, I know that we have a very packed sitting for Friday, and it will all depend on the ruling of, I suppose, the Speaker on their motion to have it dealt with.